There's something most people will never admit, that the destruction of a life doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't come in a blaze of chaos. It creeps in quietly. It walks in dressed like comfort. It whispers, not shouts. It offers pleasure before it takes purpose. And before you know it, you've traded your future for a few fleeting moments of ease. That's how lives are ruined, not by catastrophe, but by habit. The wrong habits. The kind you repeat daily without question. The kind you justify. The kind you defend because everyone else does it too. But understand this. Your habits are either constructing your future or quietly dismantling it. There is no neutral, no middle ground. You're either building or breaking. And the most dangerous habits, they don't look dangerous at all. They blend in. They pass as normal. They survive because they don't hurt. They numb. They don't feel destructive in the moment. But over time, they rob you of everything you could have been. And you feel it. You feel it in the way you wake up without energy, in the way your days blur together, in the way your dreams feel further and further away, like they're someone else's story now. So let's call them out. Not gently, not politely. Let's expose them for what they are. The habits that are quietly, relentlessly ruining your life. The first, you lie to yourself. Not dramatically, not maliciously, but consistently. You say, it's fine when it's not. You say, I'll start next week, knowing you won't. You tell yourself, this is just temporary, as the months pass like a slow, silent funeral for your ambition. You lie by minimizing your potential, by excusing your laziness, by pretending your standards are still high when you've been living on autopilot for years. And here's the truth. If you lie to yourself long enough, you forget it's a lie. You start calling mediocrity balance. You start calling avoidance wisdom. You start calling fear caution. But deep down, something in you knows you're out of alignment. And it eats at you not in loud ways, but in low-grade shame. The kind that follows you through the day and keeps you up at night. Because you weren't born to lie to yourself. You were born to lead yourself. And that starts with telling the truth. Ruthlessly, unapologetically, consistently, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. The second habit, you delay the work. You think you're waiting for the right time. But time isn't your friend, it's your mirror. And every day you don't move is another line written in the story of your regret. You scroll instead of build. You react instead of create. You research instead of begin. You've turned preparation into procrastination. You've convinced yourself that you need just one more plan before you start. But deep down, you know what's really holding you back. It's not lack of knowledge. It's fear. Fear of what it will take. Fear of being seen starting small. Fear of discovering that you're not who you said you were. But let me be clear. The only way to become who you say you are is to start before you're ready. Because the work will never be convenient. The conditions will never be perfect. And every day you delay is another day you train your brain to believe that comfort matters more than calling. You are not overwhelmed. You are undercommitted. And when you truly decide that the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of progress, that's when everything changes. The third habit, you consume more than you create. You've become a spectator in your own life. You scroll past other people's dreams while yours collect dust in the attic of your potential. You binge videos, but never build vision. You drown in quotes, but never develop character. You chase dopamine and abandon discipline. And the more you consume, the more you forget that you were meant to create. You were meant to write, to build, to serve, to shape. Not just to absorb other people's content, but to contribute something real. But consumption is easy. Creation is confronting. It demands effort. It demands stillness. It demands focus. And that's why most avoid it, because it reveals the truth. You cannot create if your spirit is cluttered. So clear the noise. Protect your energy. Make your life louder than your timeline, because your value will never be found in what you scroll. It will be found in what you bring into the world. And you don't need to be an expert to begin. You just need to begin with what's real. The fourth habit, you surround yourself with low standards. Look around you. What do the people near you talk about? What do they chase? What do they tolerate? Because if you're constantly surrounded by excuses, drama, and drift, you will absorb it, you will normalize it, and slowly your edge will dull. Not because you lost your drive, but because you let it starve in an environment that didn't feed it. You need proximity to power. You need voices that stretch you. Not people who make you feel good about standing still, but people who make you uncomfortable enough to move. And if you don't have that environment, build it. Be the standard. Be the one who goes first. Because it's better to be alone and rising than surrounded and shrinking. And finally, the fifth habit, you ignore the small things. You think they don't matter. The snoozed alarm, the skipped workout, the unchecked calendar, the 10 minutes wasted, the promise you broke to yourself. But they all matter, because the small things are not small. They are symptoms. Symptoms of whether or not you can be trusted with more. And life only expands for those who master the minute. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And if you neglect the small, you will never steward the great. Excellence is not built in public. It is built in the private, quiet decisions that no one will ever see. But you will feel them in your pride, in your peace, in the way you look in the mirror and know I kept the promise today. That's how you win. That's how you rise. That's how you stop these 5 habits from stealing your future. Because if you keep lying to yourself, if you keep delaying the work, if you keep consuming instead of creating, if you keep lowering your environment, if you keep ignoring the small, you will wake up one day and not recognize your life. But if you stop, if you cut these patterns like weeds from your soul, then what grows in their place will be unstoppable. Unstoppable. Not because you've mastered everything, but because you've finally mastered yourself. You no longer need motivation. You found meaning. You no longer chase hype. You're driven by honor. The honor of keeping your word to the person in the mirror. The honor of living aligned. The honor of refusing to be average when greatness still burns in your bones. Because now you see clearly. You see what's at stake. Your future isn't some distant Eventits being written now. With every habit, with every response, with every choice you make when no one is watching. And you know now, that discipline is not a prison. It's your passport to freedom. That structure is not confinement. It's your scaffolding for legacy. That saying no to distractions is not restriction. It's how you expand your capacity for greatness. So you start moving different. You start rising earlier, not for the routine, but for the respect. You start speaking less, not from fear, but from focus. You start walking into rooms not to be seen, but to see clearly who aligns with your direction. Because when you strip away the noise, when you cut the dead weight, when you burn the excuses, the delays, the low standards, what's left? You, raw, ready, reborn. Not as someone who got lucky, but as someone who chose to stop losing to themselves. You see, it's never been the world holding you back. It's been you feeding the habits that were too small for your vision. And now you know your life doesn't change when the calendar flips. It changes when your habits do. So make it real. Stop the lie. Start the work. Create. Don't just consume. Raise the standard or leave the room. Own the small things because they shape everything. And when you do, you don't just avoid ruin, You rise into a life that's unrecognizable from the one you left behind. A life that looks like power, feels like peace, and moves with purpose. Because once you confront the habits that were ruining your life, you unlock the habits that will rebuild it. Stronger, sharper, unstoppable. And now, you're not looking back. You're building forward. Every day, every decision, as the person you were always meant to become. And from here on out, you carry the weight differently, not as a burden, but as evidence that you've taken your life seriously. Because when you cut out the habits that hollowed you, you made space for the ones that fortify you. You stopped craving permission and started commanding direction. You stopped needing validation because your discipline became your identity. And now your presence speaks for you, not with noise, but with the calm certainty of someone who has done the work. You no longer question if you're capable because you showed up when it was hard. You no longer ask if it's working because you are. And the results, they're not just numbers. They're evidence of your alignment. You've stepped beyond motivation. You've stepped into embodiment. And this version of you, you don't wait for the world to get easier. You get stronger. You don't avoid resistance. You walk through it with rhythm. You don't fear the next level. You prepare for it daily. Because when you're no longer weighed down by habits that sabotage you, you rise with a velocity that scares the old version of you. And you should scare that version. You should make them uncomfortable. You should make their excuses irrelevant. You should make their comfort zone a graveyard. Because the future you're walking into doesn't need your fear. It needs your focus. It needs a you who is sharp, intentional, brutal with boundaries, soft in spirit, but unyielding in standards. And when people ask how you did it, how you rebuilt your life from the inside out, you'll smile. Not because it was easy, but because you remember the day you got honest. The day you said, no more. No more delays. No more lies. No more low standards. No more leaking potential through habits that never served you. And from that day forward, you've walked different, built different, lived unapologetically aligned. This is the life you chose, the life you built, the life that became possible when you finally stopped feeding the habits that were ruining your life and started becoming the one who refused to waste it. So now, you walk with something few people ever find: wholeness. Not perfection, not performance, but wholeness. Because the internal war has quieted. You're no longer battling yourself. You're no longer living split between what you know and what you do, between who you are and who you pretend to be. You've made peace with the mirror not because it flatters you, but because it reflects truth. A truth you now honor with every breath. You've cleaned your house. You've reset the code. You've realigned with the standard you were born to live by. And the result? Clarity that doesn't need approval. Focus that doesn't need fanfare. Peace that doesn't depend on pace. Because now you're no longer driven by fear of failure. You're drawn by the gravity of your own potential. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer float, you forge. And that's what happens when the wrong habits die. You don't just remove what's killing you. You resurrect what was buried inside you all along. The builder, the leader, the warrior, the creator, the architect of a life that actually means something. You now move with sacred urgency because you've seen what delay costs. You've felt what dishonesty steals. You've watched how drifting poisons even the strongest dreams. So you stop playing with your time. You stop negotiating with mediocrity. You stop trying to fit into the very patterns that were keeping you small. And you rise. You rise like someone who's been through fire and came out forged. You rise like someone who lost themselves once and refuses to go missing again. You rise like someone who doesn't need applause to stay aligned, because alignment is now your oxygen. It's your rhythm. It's your non-negotiable. And that's the kind of life that becomes unshakable. Not by accident, not by inspiration, but by the daily destruction of the habits that were ruining your life. So you can finally live the one that was always waiting on the other side. And from this side, everything feels different. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You don't wake up with dread anymore. You wake up on purpose. You don't move from fear. You move from fire, the fire of discipline, the fire of intention, the fire that only burns in those who stopped waiting for perfect conditions and started building regardless. You walk taller not out of arrogance, but from the integrity of someone who finally keeps their own word. Your silence now speaks volumes. Your presence commands without effort, because there's a weight behind your eyes that only comes from walking through it all and choosing to rise anyway. People feel it. They may not understand it. They may not name it, but they'll say, something's different about you. And they'll be right, because you stopped living in cycles of starting and stopping, of wishing and whining, of knowing and not doing. You shattered the loop. You buried the self-betrayal. You made a decision, and so deep it reprogrammed how you breathe, how you think, how you show up. And that decision has now become your direction. And your direction? Forward. Always forward. One clean, intentional step at a time. No more drifting. No more detours disguised as distractions. Now everything you do says one thing. I know who I am. I know what I'm building, and I'm done pretending I don't. This is what life looks like when you no longer live by habits that ruin you, but by standards that raise you. So keep going. Let the old fall away. Let the shallow slip behind. Let the fake feel uncomfortable around your depth. Because you are no longer available for anything that insults your future. You are no longer entertaining patterns that betray your power. You are now fully, completely, relentlessly you. Not the you they expected, the real you, the rising you, the one who no longer asks if it's possible, because you're already living like it is. And now, your life is no longer a question mark. It's a statement, a declaration that says, I've returned to myself. I've reclaimed my power. I've rebuilt from the roots, because that's what it takes. Not some shortcut, not some secret, but the daily, deliberate destruction of anything that no longer aligns with who you're here to become. You had to unlearn laziness disguised as self-care, unlearn softness disguised as acceptance, unlearn the lies you told yourself to stay small. And in that sacred unlearning, you found what's true. You found fire beneath the fear. You found strength beneath the story. You found vision beneath the noise. And now, you don't just dream big. You live sharp. You train your mind like a warrior. You speak with purpose. You walk with discipline. You move different because your soul has remembered what it's here to do. You're not playing for applause anymore. You're building for legacy. The kind of legacy that doesn't need to be shouted because it's felt in the way you show up, the way you treat your time, the way you carry your name. Because when you killed the habits that were ruining your life, you didn't just survive, you resurrected. And now the world will see a different version of you. Not because you tried to impress them, but because you refused to betray yourself anymore. This is your becoming. Unfiltered, unapologetic, unstoppable. And from this moment forward, let it be clear. You are no longer the result of your worst habits. You are the reflection of your highest standards. And you're just getting started. Because now, you're not just existing, you're executing. You're no longer reacting to life. You're redefining it. You're no longer negotiating with fear. You're leading with conviction. And the people around you, they'll feel it. Some will admire it. Some will fear it. Some will leave. Let them, because you've outgrown the version of yourself that needed to be understood by everyone. You've outgrown the conversations that go in circles. You've outgrown the cycles that always lead you back to square one. Because you didn't come this far to start over again. You came this far to elevate. And elevation requires separation. Separation from your distractions. Separation from your excuses. Separation from the lesser version of you who lived by default instead of design. You are no longer available for half commitments. No longer available for kinda trying. No longer available for people who drain you and patterns that derail you. You've drawn a line, and on this side of that line, you lead yourself with intensity and intimacy. You know your worth without needing to prove it. You know your limits and you surpass them. You know your triggers and you train through them. You know your purpose and you protect it like oxygen. You are no longer a prisoner to the old patterns. You are a protector of the new standard. The standard that says, every day matters. Every choice counts. Every breath is building something. Because that's the truth. No one wants to hear. Your life is not built in the breakthroughs. It's built in the boring, the quiet, the disciplined, the consistent. That's where the fire is forged. That's where confidence is built. That's where character is carved into your bones. And now, you carry that character with you into every moment. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to perform. You just continue. Continue walking. Continue building. Continue sharpening. Because the habits that once ruined you, they're gone. And what's left is the version of you the world is waiting for. Now you breathe different. Not because life got easier, but because you got lighter. Lighter without the lies. Lighter without the weight of wasted time. Lighter without the guilt of knowing you weren't giving your all. You carry yourself with presence now. Grounded, focused, real. Not perfect, but purposeful. Because you finally understand, power doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from living cleaner. Clean thoughts, clean energy, clean choices. When your yes is clear and your no is sacred, when your time is guarded and your vision is protected, when your word is backed by action, you move like a person who is unavailable for anything less than alignment. And from that space, you begin to attract differently. You begin to decide faster. You begin to discern what's worth your life and what isn't. Because that's what every decision is. An exchange of life. Time is life. Focus is life. Energy is life. And when you stop leaking it into habits that drain you, you start investing it into habits that define you. And the return? Peace, clarity, momentum, self-respect. Not the kind you post, the kind you feel. The kind that lets you look yourself in the mirror, eyes steady, heart full, no mask, no shame, just truth. You made a choice, a real one, not a New Year's resolution, not a motivational high, but a soul-level decision that said, I will not ruin my life with habits that insult who I'm meant to be. And from that decision, you built discipline. You built order. You built a new identity. Now you walk like someone who knows that every day is a vote, knows that habits don't lie, knows that the cost of comfort is too high. So you keep voting. You keep rising. You keep walking, not toward perfection, but toward power, toward a life that reflects your values, a life you're proud to wake up to, a life that shows what happens when someone finally stops feeding the habits that ruin them and starts living like their future depends on it. Then let's end it not with a whisper, but with a declaration. Let this be the moment where the old you is buried for good. Let this be the line in the sand where hesitation dies and conviction takes over. You've walked through fire. You've faced your habits. You've told the truth. You've stood naked in front of the mirror of your own choices. And you didn't run. You rose. So from this moment on, there is no turning back. No softening your edge to make others comfortable. No lowering your frequency to match the noise. No pretending you're not ready when you are. Now, you walk like a storm. Quiet, focused, relentless. You rise like a sunrise. Slow, steady, unstoppable. You build like a master. You lead like a lighthouse. You speak like someone whose words are backed by reality, because you no longer just believe in the life you want. You are becoming the kind of person who can hold it, sustain it, elevate it. And that person, they work daily. They protect their habits. They fight for alignment. They don't negotiate with old patterns. They don't mourn what's gone because what's coming is greater. So let it be said, you were one of the few who didn't just dream, but disciplined themselves into destiny. The few who didn't wait for motivation, but created momentum. The few who didn't ruin their life with habits of ease, but resurrected their power through habits of excellence. The few who didn't ask the world to change, but changed themselves so profoundly that the world had no choice but to respond. This is your life now, built with hands that don't shake, lived by a soul that won't settle, led by a fire that does not go out. And it all began the moment you said, no more. No more small habits. No more small standards. No more small self. From this day forward, you live like someone who finally understood. The habits you feed are the future you build. So feed only what makes you unbreakable, and leave behind everything that was never worthy of your potential.